So in this podcast, we're going to look at some massive darkness tactics, some core tactics, some starting tactics, or at least some tactics to keep in mind. Now, I love massive darkness because you're flooding the table with miniatures. You have a very, and I mean this in a good way, you have a very compressed and quick dungeon run type game. If you've been following my podcasts, my vlogs, you know there's a bias there. You know I love dungeon crawling games. You know I love, Wargamer Fritz, games with miniatures. Taking that D&D, that Dungeons & Dragons RPG experience, going in, looting, activating abilities, leveling up, compressing that. They say 60 minutes, but it's really about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. Massive Darkness does it really, really well on there. I also believe, and this is a cross spectrum of all board gaming, I'm not a kingmaker. I'm not an alpha player. I'm not a rules lawyer. It's a co-op game. We are there to play together as a team, and based on the characters we have chosen, that is your avatar on the table. Just as I'm not going to tell you how to lead your life and what to do in real life, I'm not going to metagame that on there. So I really don't believe in telling people what to do or forcing them. We're going to start at the beginning of the turn to talk tactics and maybe assign some roles on there. But agree or disagree, when it's your turn to move, you do what you want. And I'm thinking of my buddy Joey, who always goes after the loot, just running like a maniac on there. And we've left him to die we've left him to die 40 or 50 times on there. And just, so consequences, bro, on there. But we're never going to metagame. I'm never going to push that. So pushing into that, these core tactics are observations with massive darkness on there. Things to keep in mind maybe as a group, or at least for yourself as a player. So if things go really bad, really, really fast, then you've at least got a backup plan. So what's interesting is there is an internal timer on it. And it's a little bit misleading because there's this idea for Massive Darkness where it's just a randomized dice fest. And that's true to some extent because certainly with the core set, as you add on more expansions and more of the bosses with the Kickstarter, if you got in on that. I did not get in on that, and I'm literally kicking myself on that. But I've had the good fortune to play with some of those toys and with some of those extras. So certainly as you dilute the deck with more and more, it becomes a little bit easier. The timer changes a little bit, but it's still there. So essentially, you're going to kick down a door. It's going to spawn some baddies to beat on. You're going to get some loot. But you need to progress through the dungeon because the bosses that spawn, the reinforcements that spawn, the longer you wait, and it might be a big deck, it might be a smaller deck, the longer you wait and kind of explore everything in the dungeon or dilly-dally and go back and forth, whatever it's going to be, whatever you're going to call it, chances are at some point you're going to draw something that the party composition and the magic items that you have acquired will have a hard time dealing with it. For me in the core, no spoilers, Ogre Mage is tough. My man's got some good attacks, some good magic, some good health. And if it activates certain dice on there, and that's before we lay over any items it's using, it's got some bite. So when that appears, it's awesome because I love it, but at the same time, it's challenging. So there are going to be, as you gain dungeonology experience, there's going to be certain bosses that are going to appear, certain wandering bosses that are going to appear that will be challenging for you to deal with. The longer you are in the dungeon, the more that they're going to activate on there. Now, yes, there's certain quests that have a timer. Is it the second or third stock where you're trying to chase down the spider? So there's a little bit of a race game in some of them, but on the opposite side, there's this illusion that you really have all the time you want to explore and loot, and it's really a dungeon run, not really a dungeon crawl. Not really an exploration. It's more of a dungeon run or a dungeon romp. And that is the first core, the most important tactic that I would say, lining up the game to look at the heroes, the actors, the characters that are in the group, whether you're playing solo or with a group, see the deficiencies, and certainly don't look ahead you got to learn, you got to play the game with the monsters on there. But as you learn them and what they do and what they can activate, that's what's worth taking a look and seeing where you're going to push and what you're going to do.